Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, January 3rd, 2025, and today we're going to talk about modeling farms on ecological systems, tariffs, helping small farms, ? And it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right, so welcome to Friday, you all. I hope everyone had a good first few days of 2025. I am still ramping up on the farm while prepping for a cold week with single-digit lows and what could also be a lot of snow this weekend, possibly ice. So if you don't see an episode on Monday, it probably means the power's out because ice is a hoot. But assuming it's just snow and not enough to put the power out, on the one hand, I'm generally happy to get snow before a cold snap because snow is a great insulator. On the other hand, because we don't have much production going on right now over this winter, I still have a bunch of grass around the farm that needs to freaking die back. So I'm almost hoping for a little to no snow accumulation this weekend because I don't want to for that stuff to get insulated. I want it to just die already. My kids, however, opposite. They want all the snow all the time. And although snow in the eastern U.S., where I live, is not always the best for snow sports like skiing or snowboarding, as it is out west in the Rocky Mountains, it is generally great for snowballs. So they should be careful what they wish for. I'm a mean snowball maker. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Friday Feedback, or Feedback Friday. I don't judge, where we look back at the topics of the week and see what you all were saying in response. On Monday, we discussed Can Organic Feed the World? This comment from @Rutger Douglas, who wrote, quote, even if we could feed 8 billion people with organic agriculture, parenthetically says we can't, is that desirable? I think we will feed the global population with organic perma/KNS, but 6 billion or so will have to go first. End quote. I don't know what KNS is, maybe KNF, but anyway, I don't like to pick on people from this platform. That's not really fair, but this is one of those comments that you can tell the person did not really listen to the episode / watch the episode. This idea that, sure, organic could totally feed the world, but you'd have to choose X number of people to die first. It's always one of those facepalm things that people say, a recycling of the 1970s Ag Secretary Earl Butts' line, quote, before we go back to organic agriculture in this country, somebody must decide which 50 million Americans we are going to let starve or go hungry, end quote. And people have been thoughtlessly regurgitating it for generations. Butts was using that to shut down conversation and concerns about what conventional ag was doing to people's health, the environment, etc. But still today, despite the fact that, as I've detailed in that episode, conventional ag is not without its issues and has all sorts of diminishing returns, but also feeding people is more of a matter of political will than agricultural practices. Despite those realities, people giddily use Butts' line or some version of it regularly to, like Butts did, shut down the conversation. Anyway, more on Butts another time because that guy was a piece of work. But if you are in that camp, at least give the episode a listen. And in fact, maybe read through some of the comments. As always, there is a lot of great contributions there and insight in that thread on YouTube from folks discussing the idea of feeding the world with organic agriculture. Could easily have just dedicated a whole episode to reading your responses, but they are there for anyone who's curious. Definitely appreciate you all for that. On Tuesday, New Year's Eve, I discussed indigenous agriculture, and I really appreciated this comment from @AnthonyIanosis1, who wrote on my saying that our ancestors didn't recognize what they'd stumbled upon in America. Quote, I think they did recognize what First Nations / indigenous peoples contributed to the land. These people were smart, but the story they passed on, the history they allowed to be written, yes, was of the natural land waiting for exploitation. For some reason, we continue to strip away the malice that is always prevalent with colonizers and exploiters. We assume it was some accounting error or some missed data point because, quote, these people could not have been that malicious. I'm sorry, it's depressing, but often we are not imaginative enough with how much that was put into past malice, end quote. I think that's totally fair. You read about, for instance, all the atrocities leading up to and then following the 1621 harvest that we now celebrate as Thanksgiving, and you get a glimpse of what took place all over the country to thriving native populations during early colonization. New England was so populated and developed by Native Americans. John Smith first suggested settlers stay away from it, that it wouldn't be possible to colonize it. Colonists got lucky with an imported disease and then systematically dismantled native life consciously and viciously. And then they plundered all that the native populations had built over the last 10,000 plus years. So yeah, malice is a fair word, if not even a bit kind. They didn't really care what they found. They wanted it for themselves. Also in that episode, I discussed insurance. I know this is a weird show I run here. And I liked this perspective from @InBarS Microgreens, who talks about a company they used to work with that didn't work out, but ultimately connected them to, quote, a very savvy insurance agent. He said general liability will not protect you from people filing suits from getting ill on your products. You need product liability for that. Product liability is a rider on your general liability insurance and costs a few $100 a month, pennies compared to general liability itself. Also be aware, some insurance companies will not insure your general liability without also insuring your home if your farm is on your home plot, because if a catastrophic event affects both, the two policies may be competing with each other, and both will try to get out of covering you, citing your other insurance. Bonus, you usually get a bundled lower premium for using the same insurance company. Moral of the story, shop around for an agent and ask them, what does this truly cover? It's amazing how many people are not aware of what their policy does and does not cover. End quote. Yeah, solid advice there. The big problem with insurance is that the goal is to protect ourselves or to pay medical bills should someone unfortunately get hurt or something break or whatever, get damaged. But in practice, it often does what it can, the insurance companies, to avoid doing exactly that if we're not careful to understand the policy we need and have, which sucks. On Wednesday, we talked about the farm economy and organic food, and @Zarathustra, W2N, noted, quote, organic produce is not double the cost of conventional in the USA, at least not in the supermarket, end quote. And yeah, that needs a little correction or clarification. I said here in the US, organic food can be double the price of conventional, but I was kind of sloppily going back and forth between farmers market and supermarket prices, which are different. Supermarkets can be upward anywhere up to or even above sometimes 70% more on some things, but most produce seems to be closer to like 30 or 40% more according to 2024 Consumer Reports. And I just compared that to several items at Kroger online as a secondary source. Farmers markets, however, can be double or more depending on your area and where you're selling and all those things. Again, you all are my editors, so I appreciate any time you point out something is wrong or whatever. Also in that episode, I liked this from @Will Sterlin, who writes, quote, hey, Farmer Jesse, I'm not a market gardener, just a nerdy high schooler who gardens, plays soccer, and cooks. I know, right? Anyways, I have lots of moss near my house, and I'm running an experiment seeing if living moss can be an alternative to silage tarp because plastic is bad, and also silage tarps are expensive. I'm doing it on 30-inch wide market garden beds. I'm going to make a video for my extension office with my findings once I'm done. Would you like the final results DM'd to you? They go on to say, by the way, the reason I'm using moss is because I can just roll it up and put it away and bring it back during winter, and it sheds and absorbs water well, and I need it in my wet Georgia winters. The challenges are shade and soil acidity, end quote. Yeah, I mean, that's super cool. I'm sure there are people who would shoot down the idealism here, but I love it because here's the thing. Who knows what we are capable of ecologically, because as will be a theme on this show, a lot of traditional ecological knowledge has been lost, and this may be one of those ideas that has some utility. I mean, a natural weed mat like that, sure, let's go. Play around, have fun. Let us know how it goes as well. Good luck on the soccer and the garden, of course. Then yesterday we discussed farm courses, and I thought this from @TimHammond4522 was interesting. Quote, how about thoughts on targeted consultants? For example, I'd like someone to help fine tune my crop planning spreadsheets, but I don't want someone whose canned solution is throw out your system and buy mine, then pay for my classes to learn how to use it, then take my classes on how to adapt all of your other systems to my crop planning system. They go on to say, I also don't want to pay for 15 sessions on things that are working fine for me just to get the session on the topic I'm looking for some help with. Are there reputable people out there who can provide the kind of consulting, end quote. There was a lot of editorialization there, but in terms of the consultation part, good question. I know a lot of farmers who will happily do some consulting on the side, and you can always call a farm you admire or like and see if they'll consult with you, especially in the winter when they may have a little extra time. I've always thought someone who could organize this idea better and get retiring farmers a little extra cash by organizing consultations for people who may be on their who may be older, who may be retiring, those sorts of things. Maybe someone knows of an organization or folks who do this at a high level. I don't know. I've mentioned before that I don't do consultations personally because I like the information I give to be free and open to everyone, which yes, I did write a book, but even all that information is available on our channel or in my podcast or whatever. The book is just an organized version and it acts as a fundraiser for this work. So I appreciate it when you get it from notillgrowers.com. Shout out to that. Also, someone in the comments section had mentioned our buddy Josh Satton's free course here on YouTube, and apologies to Josh that I totally forgot about that. Sorry, buddy. Yeah, check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes. Also, Cornell has a small farming course that the pricing is tiered and much more affordable as far as I can tell, like a couple $100 it looks like. But I don't know anything about it. I've not looked inside that. I'd heard about it a while ago, but the comment section reminded me of its existence, so I appreciate that. Another person mentioned that the Market Gardener courses and Growers & Co. are sponsors of ours, and they are not, but they were sponsors several years ago, as was NeverSync at one point, and even Elaine Ingham's course for a while, maybe others I can't recall at the moment. I always tried to do full disclosures, but it had been long enough that I genuinely had forgotten. We stopped taking courses as sponsors or affiliates quite a while back, precisely because we wanted to be able to be less biased about these things for you all. But yes, factor all of that into my opinion, always, as well as the fact that my review came for free. I had no skin in the game on those glimpses I got to see into these courses. I may have felt differently had I spent thousands of dollars on them and really been able to like evaluate that, value. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, the exciting world of tariffs. BRB. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Harnwah Greenhouses, leading the way in turnkey solutions for local growers. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/notillgrowers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere questions come in, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Les Malden, who asks, quote, "Do you see the threatened tariffs as an opportunity for more small producers and possibly creating a resilient regional food producer network?" End quote. Okay, so that's a big question. I usually don't have to say this twice in 1 week, but I am not an economist. Love economics, love these kind of things, but I'm just making sure that's out there so that nobody's banking too much on my perception of these things. And I expect to be wrong, so hit me with it, and I will always offer corrections later. But here's what is known about what tariffs Trump has proposed, and I'm quoting The Guardian here, quote, "Trump pledged to impose across-the-board tariffs of 20% on all U.S. imports with a 60% tariff on Chinese goods. Recently, he advocated for 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico," end quote. Now, maybe that's bluster, but let's assume it's not and just follow the thread. What happens when you charge more for something coming into your country is they, in turn, that country, charge more for your stuff going into their country. This is what we call a trade war. And we saw this play out in 2018 with China, where the raised tariffs from the US meant that they raised their own tariffs and bought fewer American goods, especially agricultural goods, where we had to offer large subsidies to the farmers to help the farmers get through it. This is a problem for agriculture because at the time, America was China's #1 importer of agricultural goods, especially corn and soybeans. And what happened in that trade war was that China began looking elsewhere for their corn and soybeans, to places like Brazil, who are unfortunately avid deforesters and have effectively cleared millions and millions of acres of new farmland that can be used to help satisfy that demand while also growing 2 full crops per season. Basically, China recognized the fragility of leaning so much on America, and Brazil, as well as places like Argentina, recognized an opportunity to help take some of that pressure off. Our market share kind of went poof. That's what happened before, but what could happen this time is, well, scenario one would be that nothing really changes from that. Large-scale farmers are buoyed by the government, more industry returns to America, but ultimately the trade returns and farmers make the same or possibly more money growing roughly the same amount. That sort of stuff. What could also happen is that the Chinese market will all but disappear, leaving significantly less incentive for corn and soybean growers in America to grow as much as they've been growing, landing a big blow to the rural economy unless we can substantially increase how much we sell into other markets, of course. But making up for China would be pretty tough. Now, on the surface, and again, this is all speculation from someone very much on the outside of international economics, but that could ultimately result in less crop ground under intensive conventional agriculture, which could be good, right? Well, I guess good is relative in this sense, because if farmers are not earning as much, and I'm going to doubt the U.S. government can financially justify paying farmers not to farm forever, rural economies could take a massive hit. Tractor suppliers, feed and seed stores, all the local businesses. And I don't know the last time you were in rural America, but it's lovely, but it is not exactly boomtown economically. People are resilient and they get by, but they're not all thriving. So that's scenario two. Maybe that scenario means there is more affordable farmland for newer, more ecologically minded growers to access, and as Les said, create a resilient regional food producer network. And perhaps that then ultimately leads to a bounce back of rural economies. But it's really hard to say, and it could take a while. I'm all for rural economies being robust. I'm all for less crop ground being in intensive agriculture here in the U.S. Overlooking the potential hardships heaved upon those communities is not something I can necessarily cheer for, though. Anyway, with the inauguration right around the corner, I think we will find out what happens in pretty short order. So stay tuned, I guess. I hope that answers your question for now, Les, and we will certainly monitor it and how that develops. When we come back, we'll talk modeling farms on ecology. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruit, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join their mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL, all caps, one word, for 10% off your first order. All right, back to the show. All right, so I started pruning my existing fruit trees, and I'm not going to talk about pruning fruit trees here, at least not yet, because frankly, I'm not that good at it. I love doing it. I love that kind of work this time of year. I love shaping the trees and pruning them up a bit, but I'm a total rookie when it comes to fruit production, so not going to give you advice there. And you may be like, wait, you're not an economist, but you just did a segment on tariffs, and you are a farmer, but you won't do a segment on pruning fruit trees? Yes, that is correct. I'm happy to talk about things like tariff because frankly, no one knows for sure what's going to happen there. There could be a whole scenario number 3 or 4 or 5 in that I couldn't imagine. And then scenario number 6 that no one saw coming. Who knows? But when you prune a fruit tree, it's actually pretty definitive what's going to happen. Maybe it affects fruit production next year for the next 10 years. Maybe it causes poor airflow in the future and increases diseases. Maybe it just makes the shape funny and unstable. If I get something wrong about tariffs, well, you're not going to be cursing me for the next 20 years. You're just going to be like, nope, Farmer Jesse was indeed not an economist. But if I get something wrong with teaching you about pruning, the next 20 years are going to be rough. So there's always this amusing balance with the show where I am trying to figure out what to talk about and how to talk about it. It's quite the adventure every day, honestly, but I love it. And I'm glad it's gained the following it has. And I really appreciate you all. But anyway, that's not actually what I want to talk about to close out the show today. While I was pruning those trees, I was listening to the latest episode of the Collaborative Farming Podcast that went up this week. And you can find it at the No-Till Growers Podcast Network feed or the Collaborative Farming feed. But it was with Full Circle Community Farm in Wisconsin. And one of the farm owners, Andrew, discussed with host Jackson this cool collaboration they have there. Anyway, one of the great things that he talks about is comparing the structure of Full Circle, the farm, to ecology, and how this farm is sort of the hub and acts like somewhat of a keystone species that supports several other species. He analogizes it to how a beaver builds dams that ultimately support all these other species. Full Circle is a hub like that supports all of these other small farms. And I only bring that up because it's a really cool episode, but I also think there are just innumerable ways to analogize ecology and society, and often the more closely those analogies align with what we're doing, I think the more closely we get to successful, sustainable agriculture. Take root exudates, for example. These are the carbonaceous substances that plants trade through their roots to encourage microbes to hang out nearby and live and die, and ultimately offer specific nutrients, nitrogen, magnesium, phosphorus, all the things, but also sometimes protection from pests and disease. It's not just a barter system. It's a whole diverse, complex economy, the rhizosphere, built entirely on trade and mutualism. It's a system that feels, at least at times, antithetical to our current economic systems, but maybe there's something to learn, something to adapt, something to implement in small and big ways in these ecological lessons. So anyway, I've gone long enough today, but I thought I'd use that as a prompt of sorts to get us all thinking and talking about different ecological systems and how they are or could be reflected in our own systems, so that maybe we can revisit this idea a bit more next week. So what say you? What are some versions of ecological systems that are or could be reflected in our society, in our farms, in our lives? What does the example of root exudates bring to mind? Otherwise, peace out 2024. Hello 2025. I hope everyone has a great weekend, especially my Albion. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at Notill Growers for all of their support. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or The Seed Farmer by Dan Brisebois at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of January, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Kaylee Swisher. Oh, it's our monthlies. Little Row Farms, Hank Zecca, Ashley Sharp, Jill Crosby, Scott Roser, Norskgard Farm, Laura Britton, Joseph Sanguinetti, Richea Grant, Wish I Started 20 Years Ago. Good to see you here. Dwight Yoder, Honey Works, Lynn Tompkins, Steve Hurlbut, Rebecca S., Mark Revenell, Doug Wilkes, Lee Shelley, Brian McCarthy, Larry Shepard, Spencer Carter, Martian Cindy, DP, Kat Brannigan, who I think started all of this, Alex Savatsky, Alberto Diaz, Jason Ruel, Earthcare Farmer Jane Murner, Derek Page, Meredith Light from Granite Springs Farm, Grown Up Farm, Bob and Ann Patton of Hexhamshire Organics, Jared Kirst at Rivendell Farm, Dan Brisebois, Steve Larson, Fiona and Donnie at Firefly Farm, and Jen Lawrence. This is actually a story about this small orchestra at a high school in Delaware, and the marching band actually catches a case of, pink eye, and they can't perform for the homecoming football game. And so the orchestra has to step in and effectively play their team to victory. Beautifully, I might add. Anyway, have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for listening and or watching. We'll see you on Monday.